Hello, Tom at TPC Racing here. This video is to show how to install PFC brake pads with PFC brake kit. When I'm changing brake pads for all four corner, I typically like to start at the right rear. The reason is because this caliper is the farthest away from the master cylinder, and after I do a pad change, I always like to do a bleed of the brake fluid. Disconnect this brake sensor by pushing on this tab here. Now you can rotate this out by turning it this way. So this will free up this bracket here for the caliper to come off. This is a better view of the connector. So this is what you're actually pushing on to release the lock on this connector. Notice this connector doesn't have any wires connected to it. That's because I cut it off and I tied the two wires together to bypass the warning light. This is something that you want to do when using track pads or race pads, because the race pads and track pads don't have provisions for the stock idiot light sensors. Next thing we need is a 1/2 inch deep socket and a 3/8 ratchet. If you don't have a 1/2 inch socket, you can substitute it with a 13 millimeter. It fits a little bit loose, but it will still work. So I have this 1/2 inch socket just for the PFC jet nuts. I'm gonna loosen up these nuts. They shouldn't be too tight. They should only be 30 foot-pounds of torque. Go to the bottom one. Once the nuts are off, we'll put them aside, and we're carefully going to work the caliper off the studs. With the calipers off the stud, you now see the pads. You're going to take out the old pads and put the new pads on. Just make sure the backing plate, it's towards the pistons, and the friction material, it's towards the middle of the caliper. Okay, as the pads are loaded, we're just gonna carefully put the caliper back on the studs. Once everything is lined up, we're just going to work the caliper in towards the upright. It's back on. One thing I like to do is to put a drop of WD-40 on the nuts. I'm not going to drown it, I'm just going to go one drop. That one drop of WD-40 just makes the nuts go on the studs a lot nicer. And it helps to prevent the studs from galling. Always want to start the nuts by hand. Don't use the ratchet until you're absolutely sure the nuts are fully threaded on and not cross-threaded. Once the nuts are snug, I will then come back with a torque wrench set at 30 foot-pounds of torque. Is my torque wrench set at 30 foot-pounds? With the new pads installed, I'm going to do a routine brake bleed. 8 millimeter wrench and a bottle. I'm going to start with the outer. I already have my pressure bleeder set up at the master cylinder. Just going to crack it. Closed. Crack it. Close. I do this 3 times on the outer and the inner, and then I come back to the outer and do it one final round of 3 times. Just to add a nice touch, I like to take a paper towel and stick it into the bleeder screw to soak up the pool of brake fluid that's collected there. So when you're driving the car and doing expansion, this residual brake fluid doesn't get everywhere and mess up the clean look of your caliper. As you saw in this video, it is not bad at all to change pads in this forged aluminum monoblock PFC caliper with the X-brace. You basically just have 2 nuts and 1 sensor to disconnect, and the pads will just easily go into the caliper body. Let's look at these nice thick PFC pads.